The golden facade, the September sun, cast a warm glow over the rosewood vineyard as Amara Chen adjusted the delicate straps of her emerald silk dress. She had chosen the color carefully. It complemented her dark hair and would photograph beautifully against the venue's rustic elegance. Today was her brother David's wedding day, and she intended to look perfect for the occasion. "You look stunning," Marcus Rivera said from behind her, his hands finding her waist as she checked her reflection in their hotel room mirror. "That dress cost more than most people's rent." Amara smiled, though something in his tone made her pause. Marcus had a way of making compliments feel like observations rather than genuine praise. Still, after 3 years together, she had learned to focus on his intentions rather than his delivery. "David deserves the best celebration," she replied, turning to face him. Marcus looked handsome in his navy suit, his dark hair styled perfectly, his smile charming as always. "I can't believe my little brother is getting married." The vineyard was already bustling with activity when they arrived. White chairs arranged in perfect rows faced an archway draped with cascading flowers, while string lights twinkled overhead. Despite the afternoon sunlight, Amara felt her chest swell with pride as she watched the controlled chaos of wedding preparations. Her mother, Eleanor, rushed over in a cloud of lavender perfume and nervous energy. "Amara, darling, you look radiant." "Marcus, so good to see you." She air-kissed them both before grabbing Amara's hands. "The photographer wants family photos before the ceremony. David is already asking where you are." As they walked toward the bridal party gathering area, Amara caught sight of her brother adjusting his tie with shaking hands. David had always been the steady one between them, but today his nerves were showing. She quickened her pace and wrapped him in a hug. "Hey, little brother. Ready to become a married man?" David's face brightened. "Amara, thank God you're here. I feel like I might throw up." He glanced over her shoulder at Marcus, who was already checking his phone. "How are you doing, man?" "Living the dream," Marcus replied without looking up. "Free food, free drinks, and a front row seat to watch someone make the biggest mistake of their life." He laughed at his own joke, but neither David nor Amara joined in. The ceremony was everything Amara had hoped it would be. David's bride, Catherine, looked ethereal in her flowing gown, and when they exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Amara found herself thinking about her own future, glancing sideways at Marcus, who seemed more interested in taking selfies than witnessing the sacred moment unfolding before them. During the cocktail hour, Amara worked the crowd like the marketing executive she was, chatting with relatives she hadn't seen in years and making polite conversation with Catherine's family. She felt in her element, confident, successful, and surrounded by love. Several guests commented on how well she was doing, how proud they were of her career achievements, how beautiful she looked. Marcus, meanwhile, had positioned himself near the bar, regaling a group of David's college friends with stories that seemed to feature himself as the protagonist. Amara noticed he'd already gone through several drinks, his laughter growing louder and his gestures more animated with each round. "Your boyfriend sure knows how to work a room," commented James Whitmore, David's best man, as he approached. With 2 glasses of champagne, he handed one to Amara with a warm smile. Amara accepted the glass gratefully. She had met James several times over the years. He was David's college roommate and now a successful architect in the city. There was something steady about him that she had always found comforting, a quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. "He's definitely the social butterfly between us," she agreed, watching as Marcus commanded attention from his growing audience. "I'm more comfortable in smaller groups." "Nothing wrong with that," James said, his brown eyes sincere. "Quality over quantity, right?" They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Amara felt genuinely happy for the first time in months. Work had been stressful lately, and things with Marcus had felt strained. But tonight everything seemed perfect. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for dinner," announced the wedding coordinator, her voice carrying across the terrace. As guests began filing into the reception tent, Amara felt Marcus's arm slip around her waist. His grip was tighter than usual, and she could smell the alcohol on his breath. "Ready for the real party to begin," he whispered in her ear, his tone carrying an edge she couldn't quite identify. The reception tent was a vision of romantic elegance. Crystal. Chandeliers hung from the peaked ceiling. Round tables draped in cream linens surrounded a parquet dance floor, and candles flickered everywhere, casting dancing shadows on the faces of laughing guests. Amara and Marcus were seated at the head table with the wedding party, giving them a perfect view of the entire celebration. As the evening progressed and the wine flowed freely, Amara felt herself relaxing completely. The speeches had been touching. The food was exceptional, and she found herself genuinely enjoying conversations with the other guests at their table. Even Marcus seemed to be behaving himself, though she noticed his wine glass never seemed to empty. She had no idea that in just a few minutes her perfect evening would shatter into 1,000 pieces, and that the man sitting beside her, the man she had trusted with her deepest vulnerabilities, was about to weaponize her secrets in front of everyone she loved. The stage was set for a betrayal that would change everything. The public betrayal, the clinking of silverware against crystal, filled the reception tent as the evening's speeches began. David had just finished thanking everyone for coming, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke about finding his soulmate. In Catherine, the applause was still dying down when Marcus suddenly stood up, swaying slightly as he reached for the microphone. "Actually, if I could just say a few words," Marcus announced, his voice carrying that particular confidence that comes with too much wine. The wedding coordinator looked confused. Marcus wasn't on the list of speakers, but David nodded politely, assuming his future brother-in-law wanted to offer congratulations. Amara felt a flutter of unease in her stomach. Marcus hadn't mentioned wanting to speak, and she knew he didn't handle alcohol well. She caught his eye and gave him a questioning look, but he avoided her gaze, focusing instead on the sea of faces turned toward him. "Thank you, Marcus began, tapping the microphone with his finger. "I'm Marcus, Amara's boyfriend. You." "No," the successful marketing executive sitting right there. He gestured toward her with a theatrical flourish that made several guests chuckle politely. "I've been thinking about what makes a good partnership," Marcus continued, his words slightly slurred, but still clear enough for everyone to hear. "And I realized I have some unique insight, dating someone who's, well, let's just say she's had to overcome some challenges." The unease in Amara's stomach transformed into ice-cold dread. She could see where this was heading, and every instinct told her to stop him, but she felt frozen in her chair, unable to move or speak. "See, when I first met Amara in college, she was this brilliant girl who had everything going for her, except she couldn't stand up in front of people without having a complete meltdown." Marcus's smile was cruel now, feeding off the uncomfortable silence that had fallen over the tent. "I'm talking full-blown panic attacks. She used to hide in bathroom stalls before presentations, crying and hyperventilating." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd, but most guests were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. David's face had gone pale, and Catherine was staring at Marcus with undisguised horror. James Whitmore had stopped mid-sip of his wine, his knuckles white round the glass stem. "But the best part," Marcus continued, warming to his theme, "was when she finally did have to present. She'd get these red blotches all over her neck and chest. We used to call it her panic rash." He laughed at his own cruelty. I remember one time in our senior marketing class, she was supposed to present this huge project worth like 30% of our grade, and she literally ran out of the room in the middle of it. Amara felt as though she was watching the scene from outside her own body. The woman she had built herself into, confident, successful, respected, was being systematically dismantled by someone who was supposed to love her. She could see the pity in people's eyes, the way conversations had stopped at nearby tables, the confusion on her parents' faces. "Of course, she's better now," Marcus added with mock generosity. "Therapy works wonders, though she still gets nervous. Before big meetings, sometimes I have to give her little pep talks, you know? You can do it, honey. Just breathe." It's actually pretty cute. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, sensing the toxic energy radiating from the head table. Marcus seemed to finally realize that his funny story wasn't landing the way he'd expected, but rather than stopping, he doubled down. "Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that love means accepting someone's weaknesses. David, you're getting a strong woman in Catherine, but remember, we all have our broken parts that need fixing." He raised his wineglass in a mockery of a toast to accepting each other's flaws. A few people reluctantly raised their glasses, more out of social obligation than agreement, but most remained seated with their hands in their laps. Marcus finally sat down, seemingly pleased with himself, while Amara remained motionless, her face burning with shame and rage. The silence stretched on for what felt like eternity. David looked like he wanted to climb across the table and throttle Marcus. Eleanor Chen was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, her maternal instincts warring with her desire to maintain decorum. Catherine had reached across the table to squeeze Amara's hand, her eyes full of sympathy and fury. "Well," the DJ said finally, his voice artificially bright as he tried to salvage the moment, "that was something. Should we maybe move on to—" "Actually," Amara said, her voice cutting through the awkwardness like a blade. She stood slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. Every eye in the tent focused on her as she reached for the microphone Marcus had abandoned on the table. Her hand was steady as she lifted it to her lips. The woman who had once hidden in bathroom stalls was gone, replaced by someone who had learned that vulnerability could be transformed into strength, that shame could be alchemized into power. "Since we're sharing personal stories tonight," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I think it's only fair that I contribute to the conversation." Marcus's satisfied expression began to falter as he registered the steel in her voice. Around the tent, guests leaned forward, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The reckoning was about to begin. The calculated response, Amara held the microphone with the same steady confidence she brought to boardroom presentations, her years of professional experience taking over even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The woman Marcus had just described, the frightened college student hiding in bathroom stalls, had been real once, but she was not the woman standing here now. "Marcus is absolutely right about one thing," she began, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the tent. "I did struggle with anxiety in college. It's something I've worked hard to overcome, and I'm proud of the progress I've made." She paused, letting her words settle. What he failed to mention is that during those same college years, when I was fighting my own battles, I was also tutoring him through his marketing classes because he was failing them. A murmur went through the crowd. Marcus's face flushed red, and he started to shake his head, but Amara continued without missing a beat. "You see, Marcus has always had an interesting relationship with the truth. For instance, he told you all that I'm a successful marketing executive, which is true. What he didn't mention is that for the past 8 months, while I've been working 60-hour weeks to support both of us, he's been finding himself on my couch, playing video games, and telling his friends he's between opportunities. The silence in the tent had shifted from uncomfortable to riveted. David was no longer looking mortified. There was something like admiration dawning in his eyes. James Whitmore had set down his wine glass entirely and was watching Amara with complete attention. Marcus also forgot to mention that the panic attacks he found so amusing were triggered by my father's cancer diagnosis during our senior year, Amara continued, her voice never wavering. While I was trying to balance a full course load, care for my family, and manage my own fear of losing my dad, Marcus was, well, let's just say he wasn't exactly a source of comfort during that time. Eleanor Chen's tears had stopped, replaced by something that looked distinctly like pride. Several guests were nodding, their expressions shifting from pity to respect. "But I want to thank Marcus for one thing," Amara said, finally looking directly at him. His cocky smile had completely disappeared, replaced by growing panic as he realized how thoroughly she was dismantling him. "He's given me a perfect example of what real strength looks like, and what it doesn't." She turned back to the crowd, her posture straight and commanding. Real strength isn't mocking someone's vulnerabilities. It isn't taking credit for their successes while hiding your own failures. Real strength is admitting when you're struggling and asking for help. It's supporting the people you love even when, especially when, they're at their lowest point. It's showing up consistently, not just when it's convenient or when there's an audience to impress. The applause started slowly, just a few people clapping, but it built steadily until nearly the entire tent was applauding. Marcus was slumping in his chair, his face pale, finally understanding that his attempt to humiliate her had backfired spectacularly. "So yes, I had panic attacks in college," Amara said as the applause died down. "I was terrified of speaking in public, terrified of failing, terrified of not being enough. But you know what I learned? Fear isn't the opposite of courage. It's the raw material courage is made from. Every time I felt that fear and spoke anyway, I got a little stronger. Every time I faced what scared me instead of hiding from it, I discovered I was more resilient than I knew." She could see people throughout the crowd nodding, some wiping their own eyes. Her vulnerability wasn't weakness. It was connection. It was truth. It was power. The woman Marcus described, the one hiding in bathroom stalls, she was brave too. She was doing the best she could with the tools she had at the time. She deserved compassion, not mockery. She deserved support, not someone who would store up her struggles to use as ammunition later. Amara's eyes found her parents in the crowd. Her father, the cancer survivor, was beaming at her with unmistakable pride. Her mother had stopped crying entirely and was sitting up straighter, as if seeing her daughter clearly for the first time in years. But that woman also grew into someone who runs marketing campaigns for Fortune 500 companies. She gives presentations to rooms full of executives without breaking a sweat. She's traveled alone to 12 countries. She's climbed mountains, literal and metaphorical ones. She's built a life she's proud of, with or without anyone's permission or approval. The tent was completely silent now, everyone hanging on her words. "So, Marcus, I want to thank you for reminding me who I used to be, because it helps me appreciate how far I've come. And I want to thank you for showing everyone here exactly what kind of partner you are, because it makes my next announcement much easier." She paused, letting the suspense build. "We're done." The declaration landed with the force of a thunderclap. Marcus shot up from his chair, his face a mask of fury and embarrassment. "You can't," he started, but Amara cut him off. "Actually, I can. And I am. You can find somewhere else to sleep tonight, and I'll have your things packed and ready by Monday. Consider it a graduation gift. You're finally free to find yourself without my support." She set the microphone down on the table with a gentle clink that somehow seemed to echo through the entire tent. The applause that erupted this time was thunderous, accompanied by whistles and cheers. David was on his feet, clapping so hard. His hands must have hurt. Catherine was crying happy tears. Even some of the catering staff were applauding from the edges of the tent. Marcus stood there for a moment, looking around at all the faces that had transformed from sympathetic to admiring, all the people who were now looking at him with something between disgust and pity. Without another word, he pushed his chair back and stormed out of the tent, his dramatic exit somewhat undermined by the fact that he tripped slightly on the threshold. As the applause finally died down, Amara felt something she hadn't experienced in years: complete, unshakable confidence in herself. She had taken the worst thing Marcus could throw at her and transformed it into her greatest moment of triumph. But the evening wasn't over yet. As guests began to approach her with congratulations and support, she caught sight of James Whitmore, making his way through the crowd toward her, his eyes full of something that looked like wonder. The real surprise of the night was still to come. The unexpected alliance. The reception continued around them, but Amara felt like she was moving through a dream. Guests kept approaching her with warm congratulations and fierce hugs, telling her how proud they were, how inspirational her speech had been, how they'd never liked Marcus anyway. The support was overwhelming and healing, but also exhausting. After an hour of constant conversation, she slipped away from the crowd and found herself on the vineyard's garden terrace, where strings of lights created pools of warm illumination. Among the grapevines, the cool night air felt like a blessing against her flushed cheeks. She kicked off her heels and let her feet sink into the soft grass, finally allowing herself to process what had just happened. She had ended a 3-year relationship in front of 150 people. She had turned her deepest shame into her greatest triumph. She had found her voice in the most public way possible, so why did she feel so empty? "I brought you some water," came a familiar voice behind her. "And some of those little chocolate tarts you were eyeing during dinner, but never got to try." James Whitmore approached, carrying a small plate and a glass, his bow tie loosened and his jacket slung over one arm. He had changed out of his formal shoes into sneakers, she noticed, a practical choice for navigating the vineyard grounds. "That's very thoughtful of you," Amara said, accepting both gratefully. The chocolate was rich and perfect, exactly what she needed. "Shouldn't you be inside, making sure the best man duties are covered?" "David and Catherine are handling the last dance beautifully, and honestly, I think the party improved significantly after Marcus left," James replied with a wry smile. "Plus, I wanted to make sure you were okay. That was quite a performance in there." "Performance?" Amara bristled slightly. "That wasn't a performance. That was 3 years of frustration, finally finding an outlet." "Poor choice of words," James said quickly, raising his hands in apology. "I meant it was incredibly brave and overdue. I've wanted to say something about Marcus for months, but it wasn't my place." Amara studied his face in the soft light. "What do you mean?" James was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing his words carefully. "I've seen how he talks to you at family gatherings, the little comments, the way he diminishes your achievements while taking credit for supporting you, the way he flirts with other women right in front of you and then acts like you're being paranoid if you notice. You noticed all that?" Amara felt a mix of validation and embarrassment. If James had seen it, how many other people had witnessed her relationship's dysfunction? "I notice you," James said simply, and something in his tone made her look at him more carefully. "I always have." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Amara set down her water glass and really looked at James for perhaps the first time. She had always thought of him as David's steady, reliable friend, the architect who sent thoughtful birthday cards and never forgot to ask about her parents' health. But standing here in the moonlight, she saw something different, the way his brown eyes held genuine warmth, how his presence felt calming rather than draining, the fact that he had sought her out not to congratulate or console, but simply too. Make sure she was taking care of herself. James, she started, but he shook his head. I'm not trying to complicate your night, he said. I know you just went through something huge in there, and the last thing you need is someone else making demands on your emotional energy. I just wanted you to know that what you did tonight, standing up for yourself like that, it was extraordinary. You didn't just take your power back. You showed everyone what real strength looks like. The words hit her like a warm wave. All evening, people had been telling her how proud they were, how inspiring she'd been. But James understood something deeper. He saw that her strength wasn't new. It had been there all along, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. Can I ask you something? Amara said. If you noticed all those things about Marcus, why didn't you say anything before? Because it wasn't my story to tell, James replied. And because... He hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Because I was afraid my motives wouldn't be pure. I've had feelings for you for a long time, Amara. Since college, actually. When you and Marcus got together, I stepped back because I thought that's what friends do. But watching him treat you poorly year after year, knowing you deserved so much, better, it was torture. The confession should have felt overwhelming, but instead it felt like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. All those times James had appeared at family events alone, all those conversations that felt deeper than small talk, all those moments when she'd caught him looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Why now? She asked. Why? Tell me this tonight. Because tonight you reminded me that truth is worth the risk, James said. You stood up there and chose honesty over comfort, authenticity over approval. You were magnificent, and I realized that if I didn't tell you how I felt, I'd be just as much of a coward as Marcus, just in a different way. They stood in silence. For a moment, the distant sound of music and laughter drifting from the reception tent. Amara felt something shifting inside her chest. Not the desperate, anxious love she had tried to force with Marcus, but something quieter and more solid. Something that felt like coming home. I'm not ready for anything serious right now, she said finally. Tonight changed everything for me, and I need time to figure out who I am without someone else's expectations defining me. I understand, James said, and she could tell he meant it. Take all the time you need. I've waited this long, I can wait longer. But, Amara continued, surprising herself with her boldness, I wouldn't be opposed to coffee sometime, as friends who might be interested in seeing if there's something more there. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility. James's smile was radiant. I'd like that very much. As if summoned by the moment, David appeared at the terrace entrance, slightly out of breath and grinning widely. There you are. We're about to do the bouquet toss, and Catherine specifically requested that you participate. Something about making. Sure, it goes to someone who deserves happiness. His eyes darted between Amara and James, and his grin widened. Am I interrupting something? Just a conversation between friends, Amara said, but she was smiling as she said it. Friends, David repeated with obvious skepticism. Right, well, friend James, you should probably come too. The photographer wants shots of the whole wedding party. As they walked back toward the tent together, James offered Amara his arm, with old-fashioned courtesy. She took it, feeling lighter than she had in years. The night that had started with betrayal was ending with possibility, and for the first time in a very long time, Amara Chen was excited to see what came next. The new beginning, 3 months later, the coffee shop on 5th Street had become their place without either of them planning it that way. Amara arrived first, as she usually did, a habit left over from her days with Marcus, who had chronically run late and left her anxiously checking her watch. But James was different. He showed up exactly when he said he would, sometimes even a few minutes early, with genuine apologies on the rare occasions when work ran long. Today he appeared in the doorway at exactly 2 p.m., scanning the crowded cafe until his eyes found hers. His face lit up with that warm smile she had come to treasure, the one that said she was the best part of his day. "Sorry," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. The Hendrix project review ran over, and the client had 17 different opinions about the kitchen island placement. "Only 17. You're losing your touch," Amara teased, pushing his usual order across the table. "Medium coffee, no sugar, splash of cream." She had started ordering for both of them weeks ago, a small intimacy that felt significant. "I know, I'm getting soft," James replied, taking a sip and sighing contentedly. "How was your morning? Did the Peterson presentation go well?" This was another thing she loved about him. He remembered the details of her work life, asked follow-up questions about projects she'd mentioned weeks earlier, celebrated her victories as if they were his own. The contrast with Marcus, who had rarely remembered which client she was working with, was stark. "Better than well," Amara said, unable to contain her excitement. "They loved the campaign concept, approved the full budget, and want to discuss a long-term partnership. Rebecca thinks it could lead to a promotion." James's face broke into a genuine grin. "Amara, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you." He reached across the table to squeeze her hand, a gesture that had become natural between them over the past few months. "Thank you for listening to me practice that presentation so many times," she said, squeezing back. "I know my passionate about sustainable packaging speech by heart now." "I liked hearing about something you care about," James replied simply. The ease between them still amazed her. With Marcus, every conversation had felt like a negotiation. Whose day was more stressful? Who deserved more sympathy? Who was contributing more to the relationship? With James, talking felt like breathing, natural, essential, life-giving. "So," James said, leaning back in his chair with a look she recognized as mischief, "I have news too." "Good news, or the Hendrix project is haunting your dreams news?" "Good news. Great news, actually. The firm is sending me to the Sustainable Architecture Conference in Portland next month, and I was wondering—" He paused, suddenly looking uncertain. "Would you want to come with me? I know it's a big step, traveling together, and if it feels too fast, we can—" "Yes," Amara interrupted, laughing at the relief that crossed his face. "James, yes, I'd love to come with you." They had been taking things slowly, both of them hyper-aware that she was still healing from her relationship with Marcus. Their first official date had been 2 weeks after David's wedding, dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant where they talked for 4 hours without running out of things to say. Their first kiss had been another week after that, soft and tentative. On her doorstep, both of them nervous and giddy like teenagers. Everything with James felt deliberate and chosen, rather than desperate or assumed. He never pressured her for more than she was ready to give, never made her feel guilty for needing space or time. When she had told him about her anxiety, he had listened without judgment and asked thoughtful questions about what helped and what didn't. When she mentioned her father's cancer scare, he had remembered to check in during her dad's follow-up appointments. "There's something else," James said, his expression growing more serious. "David called me this morning." Amara's stomach clenched slightly. Her relationship with her brother had been somewhat strained since the wedding, not because he disapproved of how she had handled Marcus, quite the opposite, but because he felt guilty for not seeing what was happening sooner, for not protecting her better. "He wants to have dinner with both of us next week," James continued. "All 4 of us, actually. He and Catherine want to—" I think the phrase he used was properly welcome us as a couple. The word couple sent a little thrill through Amara's chest. They hadn't officially defined what they were yet, content to let their relationship develop organically, but she liked the sound of it. "What do you think?" James asked. Are you ready for that level of family integration? Amara considered them and questioned seriously. 3 months ago, she would have panicked at the idea of introducing someone new to her family, would have worried about their approval and whether the relationship was serious enough to warrant such a step. But James wasn't someone new. He had been part of her extended family for years. The only thing that was new was seeing him clearly for who he really was. I think, she said slowly, that David owes you several years' worth of good dinners for being such a patient friend while his sister was dating an idiot. James laughed. He really wasn't that bad in the beginning. Yes, he was, Amara said firmly. I was just too invested in the idea of making it work to see it clearly. Thank you for not saying, I told you so, by the way. You'd have every right. I told you so, James said solemnly, then broke into a grin when she swatted his arm. There, I got it out of my system. Their playful banter was interrupted by Amara's phone buzzing with a text message. She glanced at it and felt her good mood evaporate slightly. Marcus, even though she had blocked his number weeks ago, he had apparently gotten a new phone. I saw your LinkedIn update about the Peterson account. Congratulations. Maybe we could get coffee and talk. James noticed her expression change immediately. Everything okay? Amara showed him the message, and his jaw tightened slightly, not with jealousy, but with protective concern. What do you want to do? He asked. The question struck her as perfectly representative of their relationship. Not you should ignore him or let me handle this, but what do you want to do? I'm trusting her judgment, supporting her choice. I want to delete the message and block this number too, she said, and then I want to forget he exists and focus on planning a trip to Portland with my boyfriend. Is that what we're calling this? James's smile was answer enough, but he said it anyway. I'd like that very much. 1 year later, the garden party was Eleanor Chen's idea, a celebration of what she called new beginnings and second chances. The backyard of the Chen family home was decorated with the same warm lights that had illuminated David's wedding. But this time, the atmosphere was purely joyful, unmarked by any underlying tension. Amara stood on the back patio, watching James help her father set up the badminton net they had insisted on, despite everyone's protests that no one actually knew how to play badminton. The sight of them working together, her father explaining his overcomplicated system of knots while James listened with patient attention, filled her with a contentment she hadn't known was possible. You look disgustingly happy, Catherine said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of her mother's famous sangria. I am disgustingly happy, Amara agreed, accepting the drink gratefully. It's nauseating how happy I am. James brought my mother flowers just because it's Tuesday. Who does that? Someone who's completely smitten with you, Catherine observed. David says he's never seen James like this. Apparently he texts about you constantly. Really? Amara felt that familiar flutter of pleasure. Even after a year together, James's obvious affection for her still felt miraculous. Really? Last week he spent 20 minutes telling David about how proud he was of your presentation to the board. David said it was like listening to someone describe a religious experience. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their respective partners debate the finer points of net tension. David and Catherine's marriage seemed to be thriving. They had settled into the kind of easy partnership that made everyone around them believe in love again. Can I ask you something? Catherine said eventually. Do you ever think about the wedding? About what would have happened if Marcus hadn't, well, if that night had gone differently? Amara considered the question. You mean if he hadn't humiliated me in front of everyone? I mean if you had stayed with him, if you had just accepted that version of your life. But you didn't, Catherine pointed out. You found your voice exactly when you needed it most. I did. Amara smiled, remembering that night. You know what's funny? I used to think courage meant not being afraid, but real courage is being terrified and speaking your truth anyway. Marcus thought he was exposing my weakness, but he actually forced me to find my strength. As if summoned by their conversation, James looked up from the badminton net and caught her eye. His whole face softened when he saw her, and he raised his hand in a little wave that was so unconsciously sweet, it made her heart skip. "I should go rescue him from my father's engineering project," Amara said, but she made no move to leave the patio. "In a minute," Catherine said. "I want to enjoy watching you be happy for a little longer."